Try to show the flame, but it's a small flame today. That's good enough. There you can see some smoke. I want to pay respects to all of our ancestors of our lineages, the ancestors of the lands that we are all on, and thank all the spiritual support that we've been receiving for these dialogues and to gather here today and live the lives that we are able to live on these different countries around Australia. May this be of benefit and service and plant some seeds. So, we've got the lovely Shannon here today. Thank you for talking with us on this very interesting topic of identity politics. So I just thought I might start off by asking if you would just let us know, like, what are your thoughts on that whole topic? That, I mean, that's your life, that's your work, that's so big, right? Go.
Well, it's like, first, can I just take a minute to myself acknowledge country? I'm out here on the wonderful Max Edwards country. I'm today on Wiradjuri country, but culturally, I am a Yuin woman of the Walbunja Nation and strong cultural connections to the Dharawal people of the La Perouse area. So I too want to just pay my respects to those people, and I also want to pay my respects to all of you on the meeting today. I do want to just take a moment because I have been very frantic and I'm like literally sweating bullets, and you know, my heart's racing because I suddenly got a bit an attack of the nerves. So, and then trying to deal with IT just threw an extra spanner in the work. So forgive me if I seemed a little bit rushed, but it's just been one of those days. It's funny, Valerie, I think we've talked about this a lot, and you know, we've had these discussions both within groups and as you know, one-on-one. I'm actually talking about identity politics, and I probably you know, when you first asked me to talk about this subject, to be honest, I probably would have suggested that there were far better placed experts than myself to be able to talk about the topic of identity politics. And then I sort of started trying to sort of think about what that actually means to me, and you know, as a Black woman particularly. And then I sort of got thinking about what actually trying to unpack a little bit what identity politics means to me. And you know, and that kind of got me down on a bit of a rabbit hole because you know, sort of unpacking that, I sort of thought then what that actually means to me as a Black woman, and what that's meant to me in both a personal and professional context. And then I sort of started getting right into the thinking, and then I thought, you know, as a Black woman that's worked her majority of her career in government and now in a peak Aboriginal organisation, I thought I probably got a lot of stuff to say about the topic. So I think where I was maybe just going with this is that there are probably a lot of academic people that are far more you know, researched and published. But you know, my friend Max Edwards on the line did make the point to me this morning when she said that she was, you know, excited to listen to my discussion, or to be part of this discussion, was actually, you know, no one can take away the lived experience. And so I think when you kind of just take it back, or peel it back to what that actually you know, looks like, then you sort of realize that your lived experience is the expertise, I suppose. You know, in a greater, in that sort of general context. So just, you know, in terms of forming my identity politics, I think it's really important to start from the beginning. And you know, the fact that my great grandmother, you know, during the period of assimilation and segregation, married my great grandfather and moved to Sydney, where my grandmother, due to medical reasons, you know, needed to be closer to hospitals and to doctors, and that kind of like was basically the start of my life. That was where my mother was born, and it was where I was born. So it's kind of, you know, I don't know if any of you know, but in terms of politics, Lapperouse was one of the first. I don't know what the right term is, but black and white schools combined schools. It was the first school where black kids and white kids were able to go to school together. So and you know, and sort of thinking about how that formed my view and my worldview. Also, Lapa, I'm not sure if a lot of you know the history of Lapperouse. Apart from it was the first point of, we'll say, contact for it was also a place where the common denominator wasn't necessarily the colour of your skin, it was poverty. So a lot of Lapperouse. So it's got a very strong history of black and white fellas living together. I don't know if I'd say peacefully, but just co-living together. So I think some of those historical experiences which formed my mum's worldview, obviously also had a very strong influence and impact on myself. And so one of the things I do apologise, but one of the, because I'm now getting a bit tongue-tied, but in terms of identity politics, there's probably a couple of things that I was thinking about, and you know, for me, what that's meant. And I do want to also take a moment to, she's probably not speaking, she's probably busy being a super awesome mum, but take an opportunity to also acknowledge Max. I think Max, for me, she doesn't realise it, but has probably been a really important reference point and a kind of guidance around this issue of identity and identity politics and what that means as a black woman who's worked in government, as a black woman, you know, just living life, or as a black woman in a supposed black organisation, and what that looks like, and how that kind of has translated to me as a person. So one of the things that I sort of, I suppose they're more kind of key areas I think that really need more discussion was around the issue around cultural mining and what that looks like, and how particularly non-Aboriginal people mine our cultural knowledge, mine our lived experience in order to form up views, opinions, policies, positions. But in doing so, not providing us with a legitimate and or authentic opportunity to have influence on what those outcomes actually are. I think that's kind of the thing, being able to, like, I don't know what just happened on this. I feel like this building's going to blow up very shortly. You know, so basically taking the control and authority out of our knowledge into, you know, white hands, I suppose. One of the things I think around identity, for me, what identity politics is, and it's probably not necessarily always a comfortable topic to talk to, colorism and what that looks like as an Aboriginal person with fairer skin, and the biases that they are applied in the work, like not just in the workplace, but in life in general. I think that also helps, you know, that also has shaped up some of my experience, particularly around, you know, identity politics. And I don't know if it is called a colour privilege. I'm not sure if that's it, but it's certainly, there are some biases that are applied, particularly around palatability and a palatability of lived experience for white people in taking on a black story or black history. I think that, you know, when it's kind of a little bit, I feel like that, sorry, in a poorly articulated way, I think what I'm trying to say is that I think that, you know, there are prejudices that can be applied to lighter coloured skinned people in the workplace that fits a narrative maybe of what white people want to see from Aboriginal people. I don't necessarily think it's always an accurate reflection of a lived, you know, an experience of a of a darker skinned Black person. And I think that that's something that, as I've gotten older, I've become more aware of and how that has played out. Sorry, in addition to that, I think it's also, sorry, can I just take a sip of water?
Oh, please do.
Yeah, no, I sort of was kind of, basically what I was trying to do is form up some of the sort of theme, like key areas for me and what that looks like around this area, because it's not just one thing, or it's made up of many different things. It's systems, it's processes, it's people.
Yeah.
And you know, it's these structures on our ability, particularly to form in that I feel like I'm sorry, integrate. Is that you, Max? Thank you.
Integrating tools.
Yeah. So oh bless, sorry. And what that means. So I just, all I know is that for me personally, while I feel like, you know, I've had a fairly, you know, benign experience as an Aboriginal person, I've realised that really that your life as a Black person is not unpoliticized, if that makes any sort of sense. Like,
It
because
does. I imagine.
your mere existence, like, and I think that that's what I was trying to lead towards in terms of actually trying to frame up and form up, you know, my own family history by virtue of my family history and by virtue of me being born into the community and the family that I have been born into. It provides that framework, I suppose, for for that.
Yeah, it's interesting what you're saying about how that's been multi-generational integration, coexistence, however messy that's been, and intermarriage, right? In some cases too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which then for me means like, right, then it's the identity politics in the public world when you're walking around, but then it also is in your private space the whole time. It's with your neighbors and your family, and I mean, you can't escape it.
No, you can't. And I think that too, you know, particularly, I think your idea, like, and I think that one of the things that also too is become evident for me, particularly in government, and which is why, like, it's, I think what, you know, obviously hindsight provides an ability to be able to reflect and see why I always felt you know, a level of discomfort, because I think for me, as I've gotten a bit older and wiser, I've realised too that there is a currency that is applied to your lived experience. So, you know, how, you know, kind of forming up, and not in necessarily a positive way. I think that there are ways in which that can be done that gives respect and gives legitimacy, importantly, to your lived experience. But I think that that's where I was also talking about the cultural mining. You know, we have these systems, whether it's within government or within the NGO sector, particularly in the organisation that I work for, that these things take place. And I think for me personally, it's become evident that part of my discomfort is also part of my lack of feeling safe and feeling culturally safe, and having those really important elements that we need as women and as Black women to thrive, not just professionally but personally as well. Yeah, so it's just it's something, and I think, you know, it's been hard, Valerie, to some extent, in actually trying to unpack, you know, this topic, because it's not like any good discussion. It's just not one thing or one point, and that's what I was saying before. You know, it's made up of many different elements around the systems. For example, if you look at around the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council, who I work for, and actually that probably is a really tangible example of potentially identity politics gone crazy. But equally, the fact that this organisation, and I don't want to talk disrespectfully about my workplace, but how this organisation, for example, becomes an authority without any cultural legitimacy to speak for and on behalf of. And I think for me personally, and again, becoming more aware and becoming, and having the opportunity to talk about these, particularly with other women and Black women in the space, and actually understanding there's actually an impact, there's a personal impact that this has on us. And it's not necessarily a positive one. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and then, well, given that you have that work to do in your private space as well, I guess it's part of the colonization wounding, right? Like, do you have these spaces where you can go where you just feel this sense of safety and relief, or does it just feel like it's different layers of work in different spaces?
Oh, this is a good question. I think to some extent because of my own personal identity, and I suppose the strength that I have in that's and the lived experience that I have in that some Aboriginal other people may not have. That I do have the privilege. I think sometimes it is a privilege to have, and being able to expose myself to those sort of safe spaces. But that's not to say that it's necessarily accessible all the time, because to go out of our way to create or to seek, because just, for example, in the workplace or in, that's not there. I think we seek it out with each other, and it's almost like, to some extent, pardon me, it's not, water finds its own level, but it's almost like people seek out the safety in the people that they can feel that coming from. And I think that's part of that mode, but equally, that's professionally. I think I don't necessarily have that connected to country, despite living in, most of my life in an urban environment. I've still maintained that same ongoing connection that my mother had, that my grandmother had, and that my great-grandmother had, and that her mother had. So, that's what I was sort of talking about in people, my grandmother coming to Sydney as a young child. We still maintain that connection to the South Coast. So I feel like, to some extent, I do have the ability to get that comfort and to get that safety, or that sense of safety, from country, which is not necessarily other people are able to get.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I'm curious what you see when you look at a lot of people, and I mean, probably mostly non-Aboriginal people in Australia, but for me, I look at so many people and I see loss of connection to country, but they can't name it and haven't processed it. And it's almost like when you talk about the cultural mining, loss of connection to country goes with so many things, right? I mean, it goes with language loss, it goes with identity loss, food, your traditional foods and ceremonies, all sorts of things. And I sometimes look at the way that Western scientists are engaging with Aboriginal people and Indigenous people in general, and it's like, from my perspective, they're trying to remember what human is. It's like they're trying to remember, we were once human. Is this how it looks? These people seem to have more grasp of it. We've lost some of this.
Do you know what I think it is too? Interestingly, you say that. I think that's exactly what it is. I think we, as Indigenous peoples, not just in Australia, but Indigenous peoples, you find that people that haven't grown up with those elements, those really fundamentals, tend to resonate, or like a moth to the flame, tend to be drawn to that. Like, and I think about even my own personal experience and the the non-Aboriginal people that are into my life, and why they really are not just not attracted, but like attracted to me. It's my family and what that family brings, because really it's an absence of those connection, country, language, like all those type of things that in some way, shape or form we've been able to maintain, but for them it has never really been there. So yeah, I think it's a subconscious yearning, maybe is more the right term, for people to seek out some sort of grounding,
which
in their in forming up their own.
which obviously is misguided if you're going and mining other people, but there's some impulse there that I feel like people are trying to remind themselves and remember, and it's really sad to me that it often comes with a taking, rather that they've lost. I don't know, I feel like there's this loss of even that reverence and respect of like, I'm a visitor here, and therefore how should I be behaving?
I think, yeah, and look, absolutely, but I mean, to some extent, when you behave well in that, sorry, what I should say is that people need to remember that they're guests in our country, guests on our country. It's not in our country, but on our country. But for that to occur, there has to be a fundamental recognition of our existence and of our rights to country. And I think particularly in Australia, that is a glaringly absent thing. And I'm not saying that that is obviously a very general statement, or a very sweeping statement. But I think when you look at policies or positions, it's not just fundamental recognitions, but acknowledging our own sovereignty, and acknowledging what that looks like and forming that up, rather than we're still 240 something years trying to assert our rights as peoples.
I was going to ask you about that because watching your mom and your grandmother, and I don't know if your great grandparents, right? But within kind of a small span of generations, and then you get to watch your nieces and nephews after you. You would have seen so many different levels of political power throughout a short span of generations.
It's a different type of power, and I think that political power, can I just say, and I think that's maybe in a very poor articulated way, is what I was trying to say. I think for a lot of blackfellas, that power has come from government or white colonized structures, like government departments, like being in identified positions and what that looks like. Where previously to that power came from the people themselves. Like, the community leaders weren't elected on the basis of the positions that they held or the jobs that they had or the organisations they worked for. They were built on, those fundamental things of how they treat people, how they behave, their own, generosity and their own kindness and their own ability to give back to people. And I think what's happened, possibly from the 70s, maybe earlier, I don't know, but you have created these systems and structures which has dismantled that to some extent, and the ability for people to have, I think, or to demonstrate real cultural authority and cultural power, because we, and again going back to organisations, go and sit and provide or feed into these narratives of what it actually is, and it's more for convenience sake, not for authentic, like to be authentic. Does that like? Sorry, I feel like I'm.
So it's
this is hilarious because my mum's just FaceTiming me. I'm just trying to ignore it. So
she wants to be part of something.
Talking about cultural protocol. Sorry, Mum. I need to just like scream my mother, so I do apologize. But actually, what that actually, sorry, this is hilarious. But what that actually means, not just, and it's not just what that means for, you know, non-Aboriginal people that also operate in these structures, but what it means to us. And I think that, um, you know, for me, and as again, as I've gotten older and being able to articulate what it is, but it is that you know, using my lived experience, people use that to mine for their own
Agendas.
platforms, yeah, their own agendas and what that looks like. So I feel like for me personally, in terms of the you know, you know, identity politics, is I'm getting more. Can you swear on these things? No, I won't. But like more annoyed or more or less generous because it doesn't come back. It's a vacuum. It gets sucked out, but there is no return to me personally. No acknowledgement of what that means to me culturally. And so you know, therefore, as a person, you know, in a professional context, it means that I'm less generous with my lived experience because of that. And I think that to some extent it is a bit of a disservice because, you know, just we as a collective group of people, it's not in our nature to withhold information. It's not in our nature to withhold that because we are a generous sharing people. And, you know, I think that that kind of does hurt me personally, but equally, it's one of those kind of boundaries or barriers that we've had to put up to protect ourselves.
Which is which is part of surviving in that two world space where you're like, well, if I can't just be generous to this crocodile that keeps attacking me, that's not healthy.
No, well, that that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And um, and I think, you know, particularly around my own identity as a Black woman and making and having to not just protect myself culturally, you know, provide a sense of cultural safety to myself, but to ensure, you know, white fragility or white, you know, um, discomfort is put far above our own needs, you know, in this space particularly. And I think that for me, it's been a slog. I've often wondered why I feel so emotionally grinded down. And I think it's because, you know, in order for me to, you know, be true to myself, I somehow have to, you know, give space or acknowledgement to you know.
Because they're in existential crisis, and so that crisis energy, because there's so many people in it, can overwhelm the space when actually that in itself takes a lot of grace and generosity to allow that to be that big in that space, right? Which I imagine is part of what it feels like to just have this many visitors all over your country and doing all sorts of things that, you know, you and your people's sovereignty don't want done. Like, just watching
No.
shit happen, it's out of your control. um it's hard, it's so hard.
And when does it stop? And the question is that we have, when does it stop? Like, when does the line get drawn? Because for me, you know, like as I said, it's constant. You are constantly, you know, divulging or giving or giving up or sharing information, but with no, you know, no acknowledgement, no return on that. But when does it stop? When does it stop being my responsibility and other people's responsibility to acknowledge that? Do you know what I mean? Like the dynamic flip, because I feel like it hasn't. I feel like to some extent there is a sort of a bit of a groundswell, but when that groundswell occurs, it's like, oh, you know, they're being restless or they're kind of being difficult or she's being you know, she's being cranky again. But I think, particularly, for example, using our workplace, the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council, my workplace as an example, is that when, you know, when when does the responsibility come on non-Aboriginal people to actually inform themselves up and become aware of their own um,
Season. Yeah.
responsibility in that space, in that, you know, you're here to support or you're here to be an ally. What are the, what does that look like? And when do you start realizing that um, allyship has now turned into kind of, you know, not not there for the good. It's more of a self-interested thing.
Yeah, when do people
And it feels as though black fellas, black fellas have those dialogues all the time, but I feel like a lot of non. Sorry, my colleague's just knocking on the door to say that.
you're in demand. I was gonna ask you something which if it feels sensitive, don't feel like you have to answer direct. But for me, as again outsider visitor, looking at the Uluru Statement, I see that as so beautiful and such a beautiful collective gesture. But then when I think about sovereignty, I feel like it doesn't go far enough.
No, 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 it does. No, it doesn't. And to be clear, I can't speak on behalf of other blackfellas. I can only speak to me and what my experience is and what I feel, for me is legit. But no, I don't feel like it goes near enough. At the end of the day, I feel like until no will really, or recognition will really, there needs to be a significant act of recognition for those to be truly meaningful. Because for me, it just seems like it's another thing. There has to be, particularly with the Uluru Statement, but particularly with other things too. There has to be some sort of truth telling process.
Yeah.
And part of that is actually acknowledgement. And I'm not just talking about individuals, but it's collectives. Until that can really occur, we're not really going, these things or these statements and or positions are not going to really be able to have their full meaning. This is probably, I know this is being recorded, so I am mindful I probably need to tone this, but the example is for the space that I work in, right? They talk about kind of rebadging the name of the program and doing some really important things to support the outcomes for Aboriginal communities. But one of the things I've sort of tried statements for is that how can you really have or be committed to like a land justice program when the people that are delivering it are called Crown land? Do you know what I mean? Like that's what I'm saying. Like even the naming and the structures and the systems don't acknowledge or respect, our rights and interests.
It's a conflict of sovereignty, and even when we talk about treaty,
Yeah, it is.
yeah, I feel like I don't know if we quite get there, even the way we talk about treaty sometimes, because it's so many generations late. So many people have been moved off their land and into missions and settlements, and then had to move for work.
It's no, I think too, it is a different. No one country or no one place or no one peoples has like this. There could be no consistent like it's the sort of framework might be the same, but the delivery is going to be different and it should be different. And I don't think any one size can fit all. And I think particularly in Australia, that's obvious. And so you're right. What treaty or what sovereignty actually looks like shouldn't be determined by, for example, a piece of legislation. That determination should be determined by the people, for the people.
I'm curious if you've got an example or story that's coming to you where you've had a moment of success where you're just like, so you watched somebody get something in a way what just brought you that bit of peace and faith of like, all right, something's shifting, even if it's a little bit person by person. Is anything?
No, no, I've worked in the wrong spaces. No, I don't think you get that when you work in government, and particularly, I think you get that. I think in your person, like not necessarily in the structures that you work in.
Yeah,
I think you do get that in your kind of I don't know, your day to day dealings with people.
yeah,
Um, Off the top of my head, no, and I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. That sort of thinking about it's probably a little bit heartbreaking that I haven't sort of had those moments where I can see that people it's the pennies dropped because generally, I would going back to that comment before, water finding its own level, I would probably the people that I would talk to would engage with in a really deep and meaningful way would probably already get it.
yeah,
Necessarily seen it outside of that's those spaces, yeah, all those interactions.
yeah. Well,
Because I mean, the thing is, uh, uh, the thing is too, like as oh, you're Aboriginal, or you didn't grow up on you know what I mean? Like there are sort of biases that people have, or prejudice, sorry, that people have in their own head about what a lived experience of an Aboriginal woman looks like. Um, so it just yeah, it's
yeah, it speaks volumes to your warriorship and just that amount of energy that you just put into surviving and thriving and just in all these different spaces, just needing to show up and deal with a lot of people's bullshit.
yeah. I think yeah, and I think Valerie, the thing that you just said, I think we've spent more time surviving than we have thriving.
Mm,
And I think the thriving just doesn't come until we have, our inherent rights recognized and not just recognized. I mean, you can recognize anything, but actually, proactive things or systems in place that support that recognition or embed that recognition. Because at the moment, I think we just as peoples will continue just to try and maintain survival. Like how was it? I think it was last year, in the last month. There was 3 more people that died in custody. Like it's astounding that as a peoples that these things can occur, and yet we have no, national moral outrage over it. So until we can actually have these, dialogues, I just don't see it. Yeah, there's no thriving in the collective. I mean, I think individually, yeah.
I don't know if there's much thriving for anybody because I feel like on this deep level, living in this country, we all are carrying around this shame and this guilt because we can feel on some level that this is just wrong. And whether people are in denial about it or they're dissociated from that or whatever, my perspective is that on some level, we all know, like, oh, look at the way that land's been mined. That's ugly. Look at how those people are being treated. That's ugly. And it just hurts all of us.
Totally, totally. I, and I think too that for healing, I don't know. Like when I get to this point where it's like, what do I have to heal with? Like who do I have to heal with? Like until it shouldn't be our jobs to be like Buffalo's roles to be proactively trying to heal the country and do all this sort of healing work until there's acknowledgement. But I think sorry, I just lost my train of thought. It was just what were you saying? Sorry, Valerie, you just made a comment that I was
I was
trying
saying
to
on some level,
um
we all must feel this shame and guilt, whether people are clued into it or not.
yeah,
And it seems like you, because of your connection to country, because you guys have a lot more of culture intact, you feel it more acutely. So you're voicing it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, no, definitely. definitely. And it's not, it's, I think there are people, yeah, I think that there are kind of people that are trying to articulate it or and define it, but again, to what end? And that's what I'm saying. Like, when does it stop being our responsibility and people taking responsibility to take up some of that as well? Because our history is not just our history; it's this land's history. Um, and until yeah, we're not going to be anywhere if we don't take some active steps to try and resolve it.
Yeah, and it's hard to just wait and watch people play out their intergenerational traumas again and again and keep that colonization going, and then bring new immigrants in who keep the colonization going. And just, yeah, as you said, when does it end? I remember Linda Tuwai Smith in New Zealand saying last year in a talk she gave, capitalism is so damn resilient.
Ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? That's just the reality of it, isn't it? It's a resilient beast. To the detriment of, to everyone, I would say.
Yeah, of life, really.
Yeah, of life.
Does anybody who's been listening want to make a comment or ask a question, or I'll just leave a couple of minutes for that?
No, I do want to just apologize. I was thrown off my game. I thought I was so well prepared coming into this, but IT blew me.
No, we're just going to trust that those blocks are all part of your warriorship, that we're witnessing how hard it is to face this.
I just want to say thanks for sharing, Shannon. And I didn't see any technological problems because I came in late.
That's okay. Oh, there are a few.
When I came, it was all good. And I think thanks for sharing your perspectives. It's really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the issue with these really important topics or themes is how long's a piece of string, and and where do you start and where do you end? And I will leave it at this, particularly in terms of that broader support of First Peoples in Australia is there's a at work that says that I can't trust what you say because I see what you do, and I think at the end of the day, until we can trust what you say, until we can see what you do, we won't trust what you say.
The integrity.
Oh, that's fair enough, I think, especially given the history in Australia. And I like what you said about generosity as well. It's something I was talking about when I had my talk with Valerie the other week, is I'm amazed at the generosity of Aboriginal people and the giving of their time and their knowledge. But what we just keep taking, as you say, we just keep taking. It has to be reciprocal,
and it
can't be.
And it does. And you know what? It comes at a personal cost to us.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like that's the reality of it. It comes because we will always continue to be generous and hopeful, because at the end of the day, we want things to be better. These fundamentals shift. Then it feels like we will always have the cap in hand.
I just think more people need to realize that generosity, I think people don't recognize it, that they're not respecting, they're not understanding the generosity of spirit of Aboriginal people, and they're just taking.
I think that's a really good phrase, generosity of spirit, because that's what it comes to sometimes.
Yeah.
Lucas, I think, had
Hello.
a quick comment too.
Thanks a lot, Shannon.
Ah,
Your heart comes through.
I
So
didn't know you were listening.
I was. Thanks a lot. Your heart comes through so much. And for me, I think this word I want to just bring into the conversation just briefly is this word grief. Because
Yeah.
the wound of the colonists, and I don't know if you saw my whole hour rant about settler trauma, is always trying to fix it. So even if we show up with this acknowledgement of, oh, well, we've made a big mess, but, let's fix it. That puts us on a pedestal because we bring this massive fix-it brain wound, and whether that's all our technology or all our research or whatever you want to put it. And so for me, my own process has been to grieve my own sense of superiority. It's like you grow up being taught the way the world is, and it's like, oh yeah, being born in 1985, it's more this whole thing of like, yeah, we fucked up along the way, but ultimately, even if this isn't said explicitly, there's this feeling of, well, still though, Western culture is so superior and wonderful.
Yeah, they're better off that we came.
Yeah, we made a mistake.
But you also can't grieve what you don't know you didn't have.
Yeah.
And I think fundamentally part of, for example, your process of that is acknowledging that there is something, or there was something absent, or there was something missing.
Yeah.
And I think collectively, if we look at it as nationally, but until people take that, or until people recognize that, or until people go through their own personal journey of actually, hold on a minute, there's something missing here, then we won't have that healing. And I think that, that's probably what I was trying to lead to with some of my other comments, is that really realistically, for healing or whatever it is, there is a grieving process. But to grieve, you actually have to, part of that is actually saying there was something absent or missing.
You do. And
that I didn't have, that I needed, and needed to build life.
Yeah.
And it hurts so much. And that's the thing. I do notice how strong Aboriginal women are in a lot of the spaces. But what I found in the Northern Territory, actually, I think Aboriginal men sounds like have a grieving process to go through, where there's that recognition of warriorship on both sides.
Yeah.
And the pain of that is, from my point of view, acknowledging how much of a bully the men along my ancestral lines have been.
I think as strong as Black women are and have been, I think in the process there's been a demonizing of our Black men. And I think and that, you're right in saying that, Lucas. And I think that, our men equally need the opportunity and the space and the time to it's reconciled. Like, the narratives that exist around Black men just don't exist necessarily in my life. That's not to say that they're not there. It's just, it doesn't fit.
Yeah, doesn't fit what you expect.
It's like there's a unique Makarrata there. Like, I have to look at a Black man in the eye and say, man, I'm sorry for how much we've been bullying you. And he has to look me in the eye and say, like, I am a warrior. And the fact that you've been occupying this oppressor role for so many years doesn't make me less of a warrior. And I feel like that's a sensitive topic, but because there's going to be so much grief, who wants to go down a path where the advertisement for the path is, it's really going to suck for a while before it feels better?
Because it will ultimately feel better.
Well, but sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, and that's I don't know. I just always.
Yeah.
It takes. I think too that those sort of dialogues, or that sort of awakening takes courage, and I think courage comes from having a sense of security
Yeah.
And until you have those, either culturally, spiritually, emotionally, then you're not really going to be ever ready for that next step. Yeah.
Well, we're doing it. I mean, honestly, my heart, I just feel you so much. So thank you.
Oh, that's okay.
Thank you for your wisdom, Shannon. Does anybody have a last comment before we adjourn and close?
No, that's good.
Well,
I do want to say thank you.
yeah, and I think Max, I don't know if you saw when you were talking about her earlier, she sent you some love hearts in the chat.
Thanks, my friend. Yeah, no, thank you again. And they had no root fingers. That's totally Max. And do you know how hard it was not to swear on this discussion?
You did very well. I'm very impressed.
Very well. Did very well, especially when I'm trying to be very expressive.
I swore on mine.
But look, I do. Yeah, I know you just came straight on. I'm like, yeah, that's good. As long as it wasn't me, I don't mind. But I do want to say farewell and wish you all well, because I do actually have to get back into the car and drive back to Sydney.
Thank you
now,
so much for
I
taking
just
the
wanted
time
to-
to do this, and
That's okay, and thank you, and I apologize again for the delay, but yeah, appreciate the opportunity.
Safe travels.
Thank you. Safe travels.
Take
Bye.
it easy. Be well.